have the impulse to come up with a bad question, hopefully we'll remember those attributes of bad questions and we would make a course correction. And then we'll talk about how do you come up with ideas for a research question? And then, like we said, we will then look at a demo of a question somebody has, and we'll see how we can come up with a good question and hopefully create a quick questionnaire from that. All right, so let's focus on bad questions. What makes a bad question a bad question? There are 6 attributes we want to focus on today. The 6 are a question that is fuzzy, a no question, what I call the TMQ question. Number 4 is the unanswerable question. Number 5 is the recycled question. And number 6 is the questionable impact question. So we'll look at each of this one by one. And for each one, we'll look at why is it bad? And more importantly, how can we improve or correct the problem with that question? So let's start with this first one, the fuzzy question. It's just like this icon here. You see, it's the question mark, but it's very fuzzy. You can't see the edges of the question mark very sharply. In the same vein, a fuzzy question is not very well defined. It's not well defined in scope, in population, and all of that. So take, for example, this question here. What is the impact of tobacco influences on youth's reactions? Sure, it's a question, but it's a really, really fuzzy question. Why? Because it's not well defined. So for example, you said the impact of tobacco influences. What exactly does that mean? Are you referring to parental smoking or to peer smoking? Or are you referring to exposure to tobacco advertisements on the radio, on TV, on social media? What exactly do you mean by tobacco influences? And then what do you mean by youth's reaction? Are you referring to maybe some cognitive response, maybe curiosity or susceptibility? Or are you referring to tobacco use behavior or experimentation? Are you talking about established use? So you can see the exposure is poorly defined. The outcome is also poorly defined. And then what youth are you referring to? Are you referring to American youth, South African youth, Nigerian youth? All youth are not the same, right? So the lack of specificity makes this question poor. So that's why we call it a fuzzy question, because all of those elements are not well there. So how do we correct this problem? Well, we have to use PICOTS. PICOTS is a spice that we have to put into our question to make it well-defined and well-focused. PICOTS is just an acronym that stands for Population Intervention, Comparison, Outcome, Time, and Study Design. So for your research question to be well-defined, you should try to incorporate elements of PICOTS in them where applicable. Now, of course, I said where applicable because some questions may not necessarily involve all elements of PICOTS, right? For example, intervention only applies when we have an interventional study, not necessarily one where it's just observational, right? So in that case, the I in PICOTS may not apply. And that's why sometimes we remove the I and replace it with E. E for exposure. Every intervention is an exposure, but not every exposure is an intervention. Intervention simply means that the investigator or the researcher assigned treatment, right? I say, hey, you take this drug and you take that drug, or you take this intervention or you take that intervention. That is administered by the investigator, which is quite different from exposure, which is broader. I might meet some people who are exposed to secondhand smoke and those who are not. It doesn't mean that the investigator assigned them to be exposed or not to be exposed. So exposure is a broader term. And so every intervention is an exposure, but not every exposure is an intervention. So the bottom line of what we're trying to say is that you should try to incorporate as many elements of PICOTS into your research question as possible. So let's try that then. Let's incorporate elements of PICOTS into that question we had that was poor, and let's see how that might be improved. So remember that the question was, what is the impact of tobacco influences on youth's reactions? And we all collectively agreed that that question was very fuzzy. So if we incorporate elements of PICOTS, what might that look like? Well, we might end up with a question like this. Can we please stop drawing on the screen? Lungile, please, can you kindly clear the markings on the screen? And please, let's refrain from making marks on the screen. All right, so if we infuse elements of PICOTS into that question, we might end up with something like, what is the association between exposure to tobacco advertisements and cigarette smoking susceptibility among a cross-section of tobacco-naive Ghanaian adolescents aged 13 to 15 years during 2017? Now, this is a very, very well-defined question. And especially for those of you who are students writing your thesis or dissertations, we want you to do things properly by the book, right? This is just a demonstration that you really know how to do these things by the textbook, right? So this is how your research questions should be framed. Now, let's dissect this and let's see the different elements of PICOTS that are captured within our new framing. So here, the P in PICOTS is the population. So what is our population here? Well, tobacco-naive Ghanaian adolescents aged 13 to 15 years. That is a population of interest. What is the exposure? Well, exposure to tobacco advertisements. The comparison is implied. In this case, it's implied as being people who were not exposed to tobacco ads. The outcome is cigarette smoking susceptibility. The time, 2017, the study design, cross-section. So you can see that we have tried to incorporate as many elements of PICOTS into the study question. So that makes it very well defined. So that is how you address a question that is poorly defined. All right, let's go to the second question, which is the no question question. Here, you have a statement that is not a question. Remember that the whole point of research is to answer a question, is to find new knowledge, right? For anything to be researched, it must meet two criteria. Number one, it must be systematic. And number two, there must be an intention to create new knowledge. So any kind of research you are looking at must meet those two criteria. So you can see that there's an investigative aspect to research because there's an intention to create new knowledge. So it then implies that a question, as the name implies, must end in the question mark. So a very easy way to know whether you have a research question to even start with is, does your research question end with a question mark or not? If it doesn't end in a question mark, then it's not a question, it's just an essay. If you remember when we were in primary school, they will ask you, write an essay on your favorite food, or write an essay on your favorite trip, and just start telling stories, right? That is not research, you're just telling a story. Research has to be investigative with the goal of producing new knowledge. And so every research question, for it to be a question, must end in a question mark. And so here we have a no question question because the research question simply says, anti-smoking campaigns and advocacy in South Africa. That is not a question, it's a statement. And so how do we correct this? Well, we have to find a way of adding a question mark at the end. So we take this question and we have to frame it in a way that is investigative and that allows us to create knowledge. So one way we could do that is to say, what are prevalence and socio-demographic characteristics associated with exposure to community anti-smoking campaigns among a nationally representative sample of South African youth aged 13 to 15 years surveyed during 2017. Now, that's a mouthful, but it's way better than this, right? Don't worry about don't worry about the number of words in your question. That is a trivial issue. What you should worry about is, are you communicating clearly what is being investigated using all the elements of PICOTS as may be applicable? So that's what you should really concern yourself with. So that's how we can fix the no question question. All right, next, let's look at the TMQ. I'm sure you've heard of the word TMI. TMI, too much information, right? When somebody shares too much information, it's like, oh, that's like TMI. Well, TMQ is an extrapolation of that. So here you have too many questions, right? So a TMQ is a scenario where you're trying to just do too much. You're trying to answer so many questions in one question. So look at this question, for example. How has South African youth's exposure to pro-tobacco advertisements changed over time during 2000, 2020? And what is the association between cigarette exposure, advertisement exposure, and current cigarette smoking in the overall youth population, as well as cigarette smoking susceptibility among never cigarette smokers? See, I've almost run out of breath just to read that question. That's too many questions, right? And so the rule of thumb is that one key question should be for one paper, right? There's no shortage of paper. So you can afford to split those questions into separate questions that each identify or address a substantive area and contribute to knowledge. So how do we fix this TMQ? Well, we split it into separate questions, each of which addresses a major thought. So here, for example, we have split it into two. Q1, how did prevalence of exposure to pro-tobacco advertisements in different media change during 2000 to 2020 among South African youth aged 13 to 15 years using repeated nationally representative cross-sectional surveys? So we see Q1 is focusing on only one thing, which is trends over time. How did trends over time fare during that period of time we're assessing? Then Q2, what is the relationship between exposure to pro-tobacco advertisements and cigarette susceptibility, as well as current smoking among a national sample of South African youth aged 13 to 15 years who were surveyed in 2020? So here, we're looking at the relationship now between exposure to ads and cigarette smoking susceptibility. So you can see that the two questions are not repetitive of each other. They are each addressing a very distinct aspect of that bigger question we're trying to attempt earlier. One is looking at how did this event change over time, which is just trends. The second is looking at the relationship between exposure and a desired outcome. So that's how we fix the TMQ. The next question is the unanswerable question. And here we're saying that we're not saying that the question can never be answered. We're saying that you cannot answer that question with the data that you have at this time. So somebody else can answer that question, but not you, and not at this time, and not with that data you have. So there are two cardinal rules that we want to always ensure, right? Are the data fit for use and fit for purpose, right? So those are two things you always want to ask yourself: fitness for use and fitness for purpose. And the overall point is that you don't want to ask of the data more than what the data can give, right? So fitness for use is just saying, can we even use this data for anything? Data are not fit for use if they have maybe a lot of missing values, if they are very old, if they are fabricated, or hopefully you're not fabricating data, right? All of those things might render data unfit for use. But now that we've established that your data set might be fit for use, we now have to ask, is it fit for purpose? So in other words, data might be fit for one particular purpose, but not fit for another purpose. So at every given time, we always want to ponder whether our data set is fit for use and fit for purpose. Sometimes the best thing to do with the data set is not to use it if there are just too many issues with it. Some people get very sentimentally attached with the data set and just want to get something out of it, at any cost. And that is not a very good disposition to have. So let's look at an unanswerable question. So here the question is, what is the effect of e-cigarette use on cigarette smoking initiation among Congolese youth aged 13 to 15 years in the 2020 Global Youth Tobacco Survey? Now, the problem here is that this researcher is asking a question of the data that the data cannot answer. The big word here is the word effect. In epidemiology, we use the word effect to infer causality. So when we say, what is the effect of A on B, we are implying causality. We're suggesting that A causes B, right? The problem, however, is that you cannot assess causality or you cannot assess effects with cross-sectional data, right? And why? Well, because in cross-sectional studies, we are measuring both the exposure and the outcome at the same time. Now, that creates a problem, right? It's the chicken and the egg problem. Did the chicken come before the egg, or did the egg come before the chicken? Well, we don't know with cross-sectional data, right? So that is the reason why we cannot explore issues of cause and effect with cross-sectional data, because we are measuring both exposure and the outcome at the same time. We can only assess issues of causality with longitudinal data, where we start with people who are free of the outcome at baseline, and then we follow them, and we can say, oh, wow, the people who were exposed were more likely to develop the outcome knowing fully well that in this time, we know that the chicken came before the egg. But in a cross-sectional study where it is unclear, we cannot assess issues of causality with that kind of data. So how do we make this question answerable then? Well, it's very simple. We just remove that word effect, all right? We just remove that word and put in a more appropriate word. So now the question is, what is the association? See, it's a small change, but it's not a trivial change. That is a major change. These two questions are completely different. Just changing the word here from effect to association makes a whole world of difference. From a layperson's perspective, it may not sound or look different, but scientifically, these questions are worlds apart. Association is quite different from causality because association is reversible. If we say A is associated with B, that means that B is also associated with A, right? So it's a two-way street. Causality is a one-way street. If you say A causes B, that is not the same thing as saying B causes A, right? And so by just changing the framing of the question a little, we can then make the question answerable within the context of the data we have. So again, take note that we're not saying that this research question cannot be explored in another context. Of course, if you have some other kind of data like cohort studies, you can perhaps explore that research question, clearly, but not with the cross-sectional data. And so it's all about the context. And then we have the fifth problem, which is the recycled question. Here, the issue is that you are just telling us things we already know. We don't want you to just tell us things we already know, right? The principle here is DIY. Don't repeat yourself. There are two ways of repeating yourself. The first one is what we call salami slicing. Salami slicing is when you take an idea and you slice it into tiny, tiny, tiny pieces, and you attempt to publish each of those as an independent paper of its own. So let's say you have a research question like, what is the association between cigarette smoking and tooth loss? And you publish this paper in a top journal and you were so excited, like, wow, this must be a gold mine. People are really interested in the relationship between tobacco use and tooth loss. So you'd proceed to then look at a second paper. What is the association between cigar smoking and tooth loss? And then a third one, what's the relationship between pipe smoking and then you go through all the list of tobacco products and you're trying to publish each of those as an independent paper. Well, that's just salami slicing. Because why don't you just examine one robust manuscript looking at the relationship between tobacco product use and tooth loss? And then perhaps you can look at how that relationship perhaps differs by type of tobacco product. But all of that will be in one solid manuscript. So salami slicing is not a good thing. It somehow assumes that data is scarce or a very finite resources, and that you must die on this hill, right? And so that's one way to repeat yourself. The other way of repeating is repeating others, which we call confirmatory research. And so here, you're just repeating what other people have said. Somebody shows that, oh, there's a relationship between, let's say, serum cotinine levels and tooth loss in South Africa. And then you're like, oh, I want to repeat that in Nigeria, right? I'm also going to explore the relationship between serum cotinine levels and tooth loss. Now, I'm not saying all confirmatory research is bad, especially when it involves biological relationships, then it's questionable. If it's biology we're looking at, why should we believe that the relationship between smoking and lung cancer will be different from people in South Africa or those in South America or those in, Mexico, right? For biological relationships, typically there's no reason to believe that we're going to have that, differences across population, right? But for social reasons, that's fine. For social reasons, it's okay to explore what other people have explored in other areas because it's all about the social context. So the fact that somebody has looked at the patterns of e-cigarette use among youth in, let's say, New Zealand, right? It's not necessarily confirmatory research if I decide to explore that same topic in, let's say, the United States, because those are completely different contexts. So I just wanted to emphasize that confirmatory research, is typically a bigger issue when we're looking at biological relationships that we expect to hold true regardless of population. But doing things that are more social or of the more social context may not necessarily be deemed as confirmatory research. But at the end of the day, it depends on the journal, depends on the editor-in-chief. But in general, we're just focusing on principles here. In general, we want to avoid repeating ourselves or repeating others. And so for us to do that, we have to mind the gap, right? We have to mind the gap in terms of what is the gap in knowledge. Novelty in research simply means saying something new about something old. Because we're not saying that you should come up with something that no one has ever said before. That's impossible, right? So the good news is that there is always a gap. There is always a gap in research, right? And so it's just about how do we frame that gap in a way that is new? That is what we're essentially saying. And one way to do that is to use the interrogative pronouns. The interrogative pronouns are what, where, when, who, how, and why. So try and always use these interrogative pronouns to frame your research question in a way that is novel. So what, for example, means what are we looking at? So if, for example, we're looking at e-cigarette use, we can say we have data or published data has shown prevalence and patterns for that tobacco product, let's say cigarettes and cigars and chewing tobacco, but we do not have data on e-cigarettes, right? That is how you use the interrogative pronoun what. You can also use where, in other words, saying we have data for there, and there, but not here. Again, you are showing how your study is novel. Then you can also use when. But before you talk about where, before I leave there, you need to establish, it's not enough to just say what. You need to clearly underscore what is so new about this what or about this where, right? So if you're going to say where that we have data for there, and there, but not here, what is special about here that we expect here to be different from there, and there? You have to establish that. So you can say, here is quite a different population. We have mostly youth here. We have mostly people who are old here. We have a lot of immigrants. So we expect differences between here and there, and there. So it's not enough to just to say that those ones have data, but we don't. Okay, you have to then establish what is special about you, right? The same thing with what. It's not enough to say that we have data for that product and that product, but we don't have data for this product. The question is, what is special about this product? You could establish that, well, it's a new product. It is very attractive. It's youth love it. The way it's marketed is different. There has to be something about this product that makes it different from that one or all those other ones that existed. So it's not enough. I just want to emphasize that again, to just say that there is data for that, and that, but not this. What is special about this? Again, saying we have data for there, and there, but not here is not enough. What is special about here? You have to establish that. The same thing when. You can say we have data for then, but not now. So the question is, why should we expect that now will be different from then? You have to provide some justification. You could say, for example, well, we had COVID-19, and COVID-19 has changed the landscape in terms of X, Y, and Z, right? Things are not like they used to be because of COVID-19. Or it could be that, oh, we had a policy passed. There was a policy or a law that was passed, and that policy has changed the landscape in terms of X, Y, and Z. So once again, it's not enough for you to just say that, oh, there was data then, but we don't have data now. Like, okay, what changed? You must articulate what has changed that makes it compelling for us to look at data that we have now. Then you can also use who. We have data for that population, but not this, right? So it could be, we have data for adults, but not youth. We have data for civilians, but not the military population. We have household data, but we don't have data among people who live on the streets, who are not in houses, right? And again, why should we expect that these people are different from those people? You have to provide a compelling reason. Maybe people who are on the streets have more risk factors and they're quite different from those who live in houses. Or Those who are in the military are different because they face a whole variety of risks that are not common to the civilian population. You must establish why this population is so special. So it's not just saying that there's data for those populations, but not this. Why is that special? Why do we care about that? And then how? How means you're saying we did it that way, but not this better way. Emphasis on the word better. Please don't tell us that you have a worse way of doing it. Like, really, we don't want to go backwards. So that could mean, for example, previous studies did maybe convenience sampling or some non-probability based sampling, which is not generalizable to the population. But in this study, we have used random sampling, right? That is showing how methodologically your study is advanced. Or you could say previous studies just looked at descriptive analysis. In this study, we look at multivariable analysis. And it's not enough to just say we look at multivariable analysis. Why is that important? Well, because it allows us to account for confounding and other sources of bias, right? So that we are capturing things in a more truthful manner. Now, in quantitative research, we don't use the interrogative pronoun why, because it's too broad. Like, imagine the question, oh, why do people smoke? Well, we could never exhaust that question, right? It's just so broad. So questions of why are better suited to qualitative research, right? Whereas in quantitative research, we focus more on the interrogative pronouns, what, where, when, who, and how. Right, so that's how you can frame your knowledge gaps. Now let's talk about the sixth problem, which is the questionable impact question. Now, the questionable impact question is saying that this one is a bit tricky because it might meet all the other criteria, but the issue is that it's like it evokes a unanimous so what? Like, why are you doing this? Like, are you just doing this research because you have data or you have time on your hands? How does this move the needle on anything? Like, why should we care? So it could be a new question and well-defined, and it has a question mark at the end, but it's just like, why? Like, why should we care about this topic? Editors in general, like I'm the editor-in-chief of a scientific journal, and editors give a lot of concern to questions or research papers that have impact, right? In general, as any editor-in-chief will tell you, you want to sell. The job of an editor-in-chief is not just to publish your paper. The primary job of an editor-in-chief is to sell and grow the journal, to make the journal grow. And by that, I mean, you want to have, a broader and, more global readership. You want people to read your journal. I mean, what's the point of growing a journal if people don't read it? So you want people to read the journal. You want papers published in that journal that will be controversial, that will say things that will spark reactions, that people will read, the things that people care about, right? So you can understand why editors are not necessarily very crazy about papers that are just repetitions of what we all know already. Like, sure, the research may be great and the methodology may be nice, but if I publish your paper in this issue, like, how is it going to move the journal forward? So you need to look at things from the editor-in-chief's perspective as well, because your interest is to publish your paper and get acclaim or get recognition for yourself. But the editor-in-chief also has a responsibility to the journal to make sure that the papers being published in the journal are things that will spark conversation and move the needle forward in the field as well as in the general scientific discourse. And so, in general, most international journals will tell you that these are some of the topics that they really do not prioritize. This is from a perspective of another journal in tobacco control called Tobacco Control, as the name implies. So tobacco control says that the editors will generally not give high priority to the following papers. 1, studies of smoking prevalence and its correlates. These are best suited to national journals. Few people living outside the country are interested in whether that country has 30% or 35% of smokers, right? Number 2, they say knowledge, attitudes, and behavior studies of particular population groups or health professionals. Papers which are replications of already well-established findings or offer little new information, and local studies where the implications for the journal's international audience are unclear. So again, when you are trying to publish your paper, the way to address this problem is to try to frame your research question in a way that addresses global issues. Like we say, think global, act local, right? So your data may be very local issues, or maybe in national or subnational data, but there are some specific things you can do to make your research question a little more robust. One, you can frame it around policy issues, right? So instead of just saying, factors associated with smoking in whatever country, can you frame that in a policy context? Can you, for example, evaluate laws, like evaluation of so and so policy in your country? Now, that is impactful. That is of relevance, because policies are not only implemented in your country. People around the world can learn from lessons in how that policy was evaluated or the impact of that policy. So you can see that is a more global issue that is relevant to a much broader base than just knowledge, attitudes, and beliefs of people in your hospital, in one hospital or in one university. That is of no interest to anyone, from an international perspective. So how do you, what are some of the ways, especially if you're applying for grants or if you are trying to apply or compose a dissertation, what are some of the ways or some of the things you can use to frame your research question in a way that is more impactful? Number one, longitudinal studies. If you can, always try to incorporate more robust designs in your questions, right? A longitudinal question, a longitudinal research is more rigorous than just cross-sectional, because you have addressed the issue of biases in time, right? So when you can, always look at longitudinal studies. And I'm going to show you how to set them up in a minute in a demo, so that you can see how you can address some of those issues. Number two, if you can, incorporate an experimental design in your work. Experiments are the gold standard in research, right? We have what we call the pyramid of studies in terms of rigor, internal validity, and high on that list, we have experiments, right? So experiments are the gold standard because they have robust control for internal validity or threats to internal validity, like confounding. So when you can incorporate, an experiment in your study, that elevates the quality of a work. And it doesn't have to be, by an experiment, it doesn't have to be something like, oh, I'm going to randomize patients. No, it can be something, just a regular, something you can do on the internet, like a web experiment. I might be interested in looking at the impact of, let's say, health warning labels on harm perception among smokers. So instead of just saying knowledge, attitudes, and practices regarding harm perception, why don't I randomize participants into being exposed to one particular warning label versus another type of warning label, and seeing how the type of warning label they were exposed to influences risk perception? Now, I have not spent more effort in one versus the other, but that dramatically elevates the quality of the research, right? And so it's just simple things like that we can use to really elevate the quality of our work. And again, we're going to show you how to set up some of those things later on. And then discrete choice experiments. Again, this is another kind of experimental design that significantly addresses some threats to internal validity. And then we can also use the kind of questions we use. Instead of trying to use self-reports, can we use some more objective marker that addresses issues of misclassification or measurement bias, right? And so those are some simple ways we can use to address threats to validity in our studies. Again, we're going to look at an example later on and see how we can frame our research questions in a way that is more elegant and that is more robust also in terms of the threats to validity. So taken together, we'll say a good research question should have the following elements. It should have elements of PICO. So where applicable, population exposure, comparison, outcome, time, and study design. It should be novel. It should fill a gap in knowledge, a gap in practice. It should be impactful, right? You should tie your paper to a research question to policy or to a programmatic context, because we don't live in a cave. We live in the real world where real things are happening. So how about we align our paper to some policy perspective? And then framing, every research question should end in a question mark. It should be specific and it should be answerable. So how can we come up with ideas for our research question? Well, many, many ways. We can look at published priorities, and this is when agencies publish and say, these are the priorities we have in this field. So if you just do a Google search, for example, in the field of tobacco control, you see quite a lot, see over 9 million hits immediately. One of those is the report from the National Cancer Institute. This is saying tobacco control research priorities for the next decade, 2016 to 2025, right? And there they just list all the priorities or the research questions that they think are important for regulation in this field of tobacco control. So if you don't have expertise to determine what is new or what's impactful, well, you can just go and read that report, and then you can then modify one of them to your own context. Another way to look at topics that it could stimulate ideas is to look at call for papers. Call for papers is when journals release a notification that we want to publish a special issue on so and so topic. So, for example, this is NTR, nicotine and tobacco research, and you see most journals will be very specific in telling you the kind of research they're looking for. So this is great for two reasons. When you submit a paper in response to a call for a special issue, the likelihood of the paper being accepted is quite high because obviously the journal has interest in that topic. And so you are responding directly to that announcement. And then number two, even if you're not interested in responding, you can still get ideas from that announcement and use for your research. So it's a win-win. Whether you respond or not, you can still get ideas for that. So again, you can just do a Google search, call for papers in blank, your field, and then you can see what comes up and then review what journals have. The third way is looking at call for proposals. This is similar to call for papers, but in this time, this is when you have funding agencies like NIH or others put out a call for grants that they want to fund. And again, they are funding these things because it's important. If they weren't important, then they will not fund them. So this is another way where you can look at the topic and say, okay, I don't want to respond to the call, but I can take that question and explore it. And then you can also look at recently published papers. Look at the top 5, 10 papers in your journals in your field, and just go to their most recent issue and just read, right? And just see what they're publishing. That could stimulate an idea in you to say, okay, wow, I see where the field is going. And these are the things that are deemed to be important at this point in time. So that's another area, another way where you can find things that are novel in your field. So this is an example, for example, with Journal of Tobacco, Tobacco Control Journal, just going through there and looking at what things have been published recently, and what things also have been mostly, what are people reading the most? So it's not just about the latest publications. What are people reading the most? Like the most read articles. People are reading them because they are impactful, right? So that gives you a clue. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can just steal the wheel and reinvent it or readapt it for your own use case. And then you can also reach out to your mentors, right? You can reach out to experts in the field and say, hey, I want to do research on XYZ. Do you have an idea? Can we collaborate? Right? That's another area. And then survey questionnaires. This is also very important. There are two ways to come up with a research question. One is a hypothesis-driven approach, where you sit down and say, oh, I have this hypothesis. I think that X will be associated with Y. Okay, now that I've come up with a hypothesis, let me go and look for the data that will answer that question. So that is what we call the hypothesis-driven approach to formulating research questions. Well, the other approach is data-driven, where you actually sit down with the data sets. So I have a questionnaire here, and I'm like, let me go through this questionnaire. Let me see what new topics have not been explored. The data is already there. It is what it is. You cannot change the questionnaire because it's there already. And so you can then go through that, and then you can see, okay, these are the topics that we have, and this is what I could explore, right? We have tons, hundreds of data sets that are already claimed. And so for those of you who are interested in doing that, there's opportunities. In fact, if you wanted, there is so much data in this world that you can write one paper every single week. If I wanted, I could write one paper a day for the rest of my life, because there's just that much data in the world, right? So that's why when people fight over first author publications or fighting over papers that are not really even groundbreaking, you start wondering, like, okay, it's either you're not aware of just how much data exists in the world, or maybe you don't have the skills to analyze them. But if you wanted and you learned how to analyze complex data, you could literally write one paper every single week, or maybe more reasonably, one paper every single month on a whole variety of issues, because there is just so much data in the world. The beauty about secondary data is that it's free, and the quality of the data is much more than you could ever collect on your own, right? And these are data sets with tens of thousands of people in them that are nationally representative, that you can even look at things from a global perspective by pulling data from different countries together. And so that is also part of the challenge that Lungile was announcing. So we have a challenge for those of you who are interested in working with secondary data sets. We will work with you. Now you will do most of the heavy lifting, just to be very clear. We'll show you guidance. We'll have a session on how to analyze complex survey data sets, because you need to learn how to do that, right? So we're going to have hands-on session where we divide folks into groups based on research questions. So we will come up with research questions. You can then identify which group you want to participate in, which questions or which topics you want to participate in, and then we'll provide hands-on training so that your team will develop that paper, will review it, provide guidance. So that's part of a challenge we're doing. So Lungile will share Lungile, if you can share the flyer for those who are interested in responding to the challenge. That's the opportunity you have to actually see how we approach research from a data-driven perspective, where you have the data, you have a questionnaire, and then the art of coming up with research questions from existing data. That is an art that every researcher should have if you really want to publish much. Because it's not sustainable for you to go and say, oh, I'm going to go and look for grants, then I'm going to go and collect the data. And then 3 years later, I'm going to analyze the data. Well, you're going to be publishing one paper per 2 years at that rate, or about 3 years, right? A more sustainable approach is to do a little bit of both, but leaning more towards analysis of existing data, because like I said, there's an infinite number of data sets available that you can use. So that is a huge opportunity that so it's just about developing the art of coming up with research questions from existing data. All right, so that's the end of our session today. We're going to do a hands-on part to look at how you can develop some of those research questions that we talked about, because we said you could use these approaches to come up with research questions. So we just want to show you how you can set all of those things on the Chisquares platform. If you want to do longitudinal studies, for example, how do you frame research questions that are aligned with longitudinal studies, and how do you set them up on the Chisquares platform? If you want to do experimental questions, how do you set them up? How do you frame the questions? How do you set them up? So we just want to do that now, but I see there are some hands up. Lungile, how do you want to do this? Do we answer the questions first, or do we go on with our demo first and then answer later?
There's just one hand up, so I'll take that hand and then we can continue.
All right, great.
Charles.
Prof, I think let me allow you to do the practical sections. Perhaps it will answer my question.
All right.
I'll prepare it that way, Prof.
Okay, sure. Sounds good. So let us see how. So the goal is that we don't. What we're trying to do is that we want to avoid everything on this page, right? We don't want to be asking questions that are deemed parochial or very narrow-minded. So as professionals, we want to say, all right, we want to say no to, because there's also expectations, right? If a bachelor's student or a master's student come up with a research question that says knowledge, attitudes, and beliefs of whatever, sure, like that is acceptable. But that will not be so acceptable if you are at a doctoral level, right? Because you should be doing something a little bit more advanced than that. So some of these things are also contextual in terms of where you are. But the idea is that assuming that we're all, mid-level professionals or advanced in our careers, the goal is that we want to shift away. So it's not saying that this is bad, but in general, I want to take a shift from these kinds of questions that are very narrow and very descriptive to these kinds of questions that are more analytical and more robust, right? So that's the whole idea we're trying to advocate for now. So let's look at how we might frame that. So let's start with longitudinal studies. Let me open a Word document. Let's see. All right, so let's explore some questions that might be suited for longitudinal. So longitudinal studies. So do we have examples of people who have we asked earlier for people who have research questions to drop them in the chat. Lungile, did we have any takers?
Yes, we had earlier. Let me just scroll up. Let me see. Sorry, checking.
Okay.
I see there are new messages, but I was just checking. I'm already like at the top. I don't want to go down. So suggested research topic from Bello, synergistic digital transformation, colon.
I'm going to copy some of those questions and then I'm going to go over some of them, some of the things we should avoid based on the questions that have provided here. So let's go through some of them and how some of those I'm just going to pick one more and all right, I think that's enough. Let me just see if there's one more and then we can call that. All right, that's enough. So I'm going to confirm you can see my Word document.
Yes, you can.
All right. So the first one, what is the prevalence of hypertension and diabetes among patients attending Our Lady of Apostle Hospital, Akwanga, Nasarawa State? Who can tell us what their thoughts are about this question? Like, what do you think? From what we've covered so far, what are your impressions about this question? You can unmute yourself and speak if you have any thoughts. No thoughts?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, yes.
Yes, thank you very much, Prof. I think that looks like a cross-sectional study because it's talking about prevalence of hypertension and diabetes amongst a group of patients.
Exactly. Now, when we go back to the issues we mentioned here, like the issues that the Journal of Tobacco Control mentioned, right? Do you see that research question being guilty of any of those? In terms of its appeal to an international audience, would you, if you were the editor-in-chief of an international journal, what would you be willing to will you be willing to accept this particular research question for publication? Yes or no? If so, why? Again, if you have a thought, you can unmute yourself and speak.
I think the topic is a bit restricted to a local audience.
Yeah. Do you think anybody international from an international context is particularly interested in what's happening in Our Lady of Apostle Hospital? Like, do you think, in terms of the relevance to a global audience, and whoever, Whoever's paper this is, please do not take this personal. We're just trying to learn.
Prof, but what you
Yes.
have said
No,
so
Prof.
far, this does not apply in terms of an international context. Within the local setting, it may be relevant, but in the global landscape, I don't think an editor who is actually looking for more people to read his or her journal will be interested in such a topic. My take on that. Thanks.
Okay.
Hello,
So,
Prof.
yes, go ahead.
My own thinking is that the period for the study is not there, and the population, the age brackets is not there. So it's difficult to assess the PICOTS elements. Some of them are not inside the question.
Thank you very much.
So,
So,
this is,
I think I have an opinion.
let's go
A
ahead.
different opinion. Yes, I feel that, for me, I feel that all research is relevant. So far, they are filling a gap. All research. But the only thing there is, how can we generalize our research? Because there are some research, because they may not serve as a sample representative of a general population. Yes, you might begin to question the generalizability of that research. But then, so far you can generalize it, maybe you can give a generalization within a local community. I feel that research has filled a gap, which to a certain extent is generalizable in that local community. Because when you conduct an international research in that sense too, you give a generalization. And so it depends on, do they serve as a sample representative? So I think that every research for me is relevant. The difference is how you generalize. So this, for me, this research may be generalizable, maybe in Nasarawa State. Yes. And maybe we can assume that it serves as a representative of the whole Nasarawa State.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're taking too long.
Yes.
Hello, Prof. Hello, Prof.
Okay.
It's on the line.
Okay, we can.
Francis on the line. Hello,
You are
Prof.
muted.
Yeah. Prof.
Can I?
Yeah. My take is hypertension, diabetics, both have a global perspective. It happens everywhere. So the thing is, how do you now globalize this? It can come in terms of modeling. How do you ensure that the prevalence of what you are doing is well predicted? The kind of model that you use, the kind of data that you use, and at times you can make it experimental. And such will be more appealing in terms of filling gaps on what people have done globally, how the prevalence had been determined. Then under what context do you want to undertake this study in Nasarawa? So that will be able to give you a global perspective so that the audience will now look at the technique in terms of data science that you have employed. That's just my contribution. Thanks. We can't hear, Prof.
We can't hear you. You are muted.
Please unmute
Okay.
yourself.
All right. Thank you.
Hello.
All your perspectives are correct.
Can I try? I haven't tried. Can I try? I've got different perspectives.
Please, can you
Please.
make it one?
Yeah. Can I go ahead?
No, we're proceeding. Thank you. So all your perspectives are correct. Yes, all research is impactful. So the question is not whether research is impactful. The issue is you as the researcher, you want to publish in an international journal. So those are two different issues. Of course, the reason why you set out to do the research is because it is important to you in your context. But we as researchers, we're not all for altruism. We do research because first and foremost, it advances our careers, right? Sure, we want to save the world and make the world a better place, but first and foremost, we also want to publish in a decent journal. If that is a priority, then it makes sense to think about the impact of a paper, not only from your perspective, but most importantly, from the perspective of the editor-in-chief. Because when it comes to impact, the only person whose opinion matters is that of the editor-in-chief. He's the one he or she decides whether to reject the paper or to accept the paper. So the issue is not whether it's not impactful to you or to your community. The question is it impactful to the journal? That is the framework we're looking at. So one way we can do this is to there are many ways we can do that. One, we can look at issues of the population, which is the PICO, right? Our Lady of Apostle, this is too narrow, right? We can say, what is the prevalence of hypertension and diabetes among, patients? But the question is, what patients, right? It's not very clear. So what are the prevalence of hypertension and diabetes among adults in Nigeria, let's say, during 2021 or 23? Or we can say comparison of prevalence of hypertension and diabetes before and after COVID-19 among adults in Nigeria, right? Yes, 2017, maybe we had data before COVID-19, 2017 to 2024, right? Now, in that case, we can argue that, well, COVID happened the whole world over. So the issues of the residual impact of COVID-19, especially among certain groups, is of importance, right? We can also make the study more impactful by changing the outcome of interest or the epidemiologic measure from prevalence to maybe incidence, right? Assessment of incidence of hypertension and diabetes, for example, among COVID-19 survivors. So again, we're saying that maybe the argument here could be that biologically, maybe COVID-19 has, even survivors of COVID-19, there are some long-term sequelae of the condition. And so maybe previous studies have not examined that in detail. So we are going to come up with a longitudinal study that looks at the incidence of hypertension and diabetes among individuals who survived COVID-19 from this period to that period, right? And so on and so forth, right? But the goal is framing your research question in a way that it's not just of interest to your hospital, but to a global audience that they can see that and say, oh, wow, this is something that would be applicable or that would make sense, and so that is one way we can do that, right? And so it's understanding the principles. That's why we went through the 6 issues and knowing that, okay, how do we make sure that the population, again, it all boils down to PICO, right? It all boils down to PICO, the population of interest. Instead of looking at this narrow, tiny, parochial population, can we look at the broader population, right? How many people are we including in the study, right? Is it a representative sample, right? That, any day, any time, a sample that is representative will be more impactful than one that is not representative. Are we looking at data longitudinally or just cross-sectionally? All right, so let us see if, assuming that we wanted to look at this research question, what is the prevalence of hypertension and diabetes among adults in Nigeria during 2023? Here, we are arguing that this is a large representative sample of Nigeria overall, right? And we can even make this more novel by looking at it among not just adults, but pediatric population. Because there are lots of studies on prevalence of hypertension and diabetes, and in the older population, right? The argument is that people link diabetes and hypertension to people who are old. but there's little research among the pediatric population from ages so and so. Now your study is suddenly very novel and very interesting because it's looking at old things from a new perspective, right? By just changing the P in PICOTS to younger adults. Now, that is something that I would love to read because it's certainly not just same old story. It definitely has a new twist. So it's about looking at your research question and saying, what in PICOTS can I tweak? Can I tweak the P or the I or the C or the O or the T or the S, right? So you can tweak any of those to make your research question novel. So let us see how you can, some of the methodologic issues that you can address, things like sample size and sampling, and making sure that the selection is representative and compelling. So let's see how you can use the Chisquares platform to do that. So for those of you who are new, the Chisquares platform is a one-stop shop for research. You can do a whole bunch of things that are related to research, from designing your studies to sample size calculation to collection of data and all of that. So we just want to see how, if that is the research question we have, how do we go about with the sample size calculation and with the sampling to make sure that we can frame our research question in a more compelling way that will be a lot more palatable to journal editors in an international context. So this is the website. To access the Chisquares platform, you come to chisquares.com. If you don't have an account, you sign up. If you have already, you log in. You can also drop the link to the platform for folks who might not have access to it. All right, so once you log into the Chisquares platform, you will come to the dashboard. The dashboard is just a shortcut where you can access everything from the platform. On the left here, those are some of the features on the platform. You have the AI toolkit, which allows you to develop a research proposal. We just launched this, a few days ago, and it's still in beta mode. So beta version simply means that this is a test product. It's not finalized. We are releasing it to you because we don't just want to build in stealth mode. We want to take your feedback. If people have suggestions about tools that they want us to incorporate, we can certainly add them at this point. We can consider them. So beta period this is when you provide your feedback. So think of it as work in progress. But you should definitely go here and try your hand at how do you come up with the research question. This is very relevant to what we just discussed. You type your research title and your idea, and it will come up with a question for you. If you trying to write a proposal, instead of spending weeks writing it manually, you just come here and do that, and it's going to generate that for you within just minutes. So that's what the research proposal, the AI toolkit is all about. It's an extremely useful piece of tool. The survey bank allows you to repurpose questions so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So if you're trying, there's literally nothing new under the sun. So if you're trying to develop a survey, for example, you can use existing surveys and just repurpose them for your own use case. Sample size allows you to calculate sample size for any kind of epidemiologic study, whether it's observational or experimental. Sampling is a tool that allows you to draw a representative sample for for any country of the world. So let's start with, and then survey design obviously is where you design your surveys. So let's start with our sample size calculation. Let's say that we want to do this study here, right? What is the prevalence of hypertension and diabetes among the pediatric population aged, let's say 12 to 17 years old in Nigeria during 2024, right? That's the research question we have decided. And our target journal here is, JAMA Pediatrics. This is a good journal for that, right? Again, we're not saying that the original research question is not good. I want to emphasize that. We're just saying that if you want to publish in JAMA Pediatrics, this is dead on arrival, right? This may stand a chance because it's deemed in a way, Nigeria is obviously a large country, and we're looking at a pediatric population And the study is novel because it's the first look at that in that population. And so yeah, so that's what we're saying. It's not that this was bad. This is fine. It addresses a local or a topical issue, but from the context of the editor-in-chief is the final authority on what is impactful. As far as his journal or her journal is concerned, well, you have to make sure that the editor-in-chief likes the paper. All right, so let's go ahead and calculate sample size. We want to calculate how many youth do we need if we wanted to do the study. So here we come to sample size, and we're going to select the study we need. So this will be a cross-sectional study because we're looking at a survey. A survey is the same thing as a cross-sectional study. And we're going to select percentage as outcome, right? The platform tells you the values, default values you can allow. So level of confidence is 95. The prevalence of the outcome, in other words, what's the prevalence of hypertension and diabetes? In a case where you have two outcomes like this, sample size calculation must be based only on one outcome. So sometimes we have surveys with many, many outcomes in them. But for the sake of sample size calculation, you must select one outcome, and that will be the primary outcome that will determine every other thing as far as sample size calculation and every other thing. So in this case, we can say our primary outcome is hypertension, for example. And so you provide the prevalence of hypertension in the youth population. If we don't know that prevalence, we can go ahead and put 50%. Now, you might be wondering what is special about 50? Well, 50% guarantees us that we're going to have the maximum sample size possible for a categorical outcome. Now, that protects us, right? Because that's a very conservative approach, because we don't want to underestimate the sample size we need. If anything, it's better to overestimate the sample size than to underestimate it, because underestimating is a bad thing. It's a worse evil. So putting a sample size, a prevalence of 50% generates the maximum sample size, and that's because at 50%, that is the maximum variance we can have. And so so in this case, we don't know what the prevalence of hypertension is among youth, so we'll go ahead and put 50%. The population size is all youth in Nigeria aged 12 to 17 years. So we can say how many people fall in that bracket across all of Nigeria. Well, if we don't know that number, we can just leave it at 1 million. It's fine. It doesn't have to be very, very precise. And that is because sample size is really agnostic of the population size when the population size is very large. So here we're just going to leave it at 1 million. Will cluster sampling be performed? Yes, we want to perform cluster sampling because we don't have a list of all the youth aged 12 to 17 years old in Nigeria. And for this study, most likely we want to do a cluster sampling where in maybe a two-stage cluster sampling, or maybe even a three-stage cluster sampling, where we'll first of all select local government areas at random. And then within local government areas, we'll select schools. And then within schools, we'll select classes that fits that age group. And then we'll sample all the kids in the selected classes, right? So that kind of sampling is called a cluster sampling. And so will cluster sampling be performed? Definitely, yes, we're going to perform cluster sampling. The design effect. The design effect is just a term that is a concept. Think of it as an adjustment factor. When we use cluster sampling, the problem is that people in the same cluster look alike. People in the same local government area are more similar to each other than those in another local government area. Students in the same school are more alike than those in another school, right? So clustering always brings about this problem of people looking like each other. And so the problem is that the answers also are very similar because they are similar themselves. Think of an extreme case whereby for every second person we interview, we are getting an exact answer as the first person. So the second guy is always a clone of the first person. So in other words, if we wanted to survey 100 people, the only thing we have gotten is 50 unique answers because every second person is a clone of the first. So the problem of cloning or, clustering of answers is a problem in cluster sampling. And so to correct for that, we have to introduce a multiplier factor that says, okay, we wanted 100 answers, but we can see that every second guy is a clone of the first one. So that means that to get 100 unique answers, we have to multiply by 2. So the design effect here is 2, because it's trying to correct for the fact that people in the same cluster are very similar to each other. So you have to provide a design effect. If you don't know what it is, you can put a value between 1.5 and 3. We provide you the hints here, and so you can follow those. Number of strata. Here we only have one stratum. Strata simply means that sometimes you want to do a survey and you want to divide the population into different groups so that you have adequate representation from each part. So let's say you are very interested in capturing both students in rural areas and those in urban areas. But you knew that if you left it to chance, most of the people in your study will be urban areas. So to avoid that, you first of all stratify rural and then urban, and then you are treating them as very separate populations. So that, stratification increases the number of sample size. So for this study, we just chose not to stratify. We're just going to keep it as one stratum. The margin of error is 5. And let's say the anticipated response rate is 60%. We are going to capture them in school, so we believe that most of them will respond. So we can even say, oh, it's going to be 70%. So when margin of error is 5. When we get our results, this tells us that we need 824 youth who are of that age bracket, right? Changing these parameters will change the sample size. So one of the things you can do is to play with this tool and see how does the sample size change when you change certain parameters. So for example, if we decided to stratify into rural and urban, and we put number of strata as 2, you should know that that would double the sample size, right? Because sample size increases as a function of the number of strata. So, so now we have our sample size. Let's just keep it at 1 stratum for simplicity. So we have 824 people, right? Now that we know the number of people who are needed in our study, the next question is, how do we sample these people? Like, we can't exactly just go to the first, airport we landed in and just grab all the 12, 17 years old. If the study is going to be representative, then sampling has to be done in a way that is representative as well. So this is where you come to sampling. We start new sampling, and we want to automatically draw samples. And the country of interest is Nigeria. We're interested in national samples, so we're not going to restrict it to any state here. The next thing is we have to select the number of clusters we wish to select. So remember that we're doing cluster sampling. The platform uses second administrative units as clusters. So in Nigeria, the first administrative units are states, second are local government areas. So this is the number that you have in that country. So let's say in large surveys, typically we take between 2 to 5% of available clusters. So in this case, let's say we want to select, let's say 50 of those as the clusters we want to go to. So let's make it 30. 50 is quite a lot. Going to 30 local governments is not a joke. And then our sample size was, let's say 800 approximately, or 850, I can't remember. So when we get sample, the platform applies random sampling, what we call a 2-stage PPS sample, and tells us where we would have to go to sample to ensure that our results are representative of the country overall. So now we would have to then go to all of those areas and select the individuals. So we know that we can go to wherever this place is and sample 28 people there, and we'll go to the next one, and again, and that's how we're going to draw our sample, right? So that is how we would approach our sampling. We would calculate our sample size, we'll do our sampling, and then for our study design, we can choose to have a cross-sectional survey. But if we really, really wanted to really up our game, we can choose to look at trajectories, right? We can look at if we really wanted to make it a lot more impactful, we can look at trajectories of hypertension and diabetes symptoms, right, among the pediatric population. So in other words, we are trying to follow these individuals over time, right? So that means we have to make a decision whether we want to do things cross-sectionally. So that's one of the decisions you have to make, right? If you can, always go for a longitudinal design where possible, because if you're applying for a grant, it's just more robust and more likely to be considered favorably. But Of course, sometimes you just have to be pragmatic as well. Let me show you how to set up longitudinal as well as cross-sectional studies on the Chisquares platform. So let us say we wanted to design that study and we want to decide whether it's going to be cross-sectional or longitudinal. So we'll come here to survey design and we'll click on start new survey. So this page is simply telling you that the platform allows for both cross-sectional and longitudinal studies. You don't have to make a selection now, but you can also switch. If you started as cross-sectional, you can always switch it to longitudinal later. So let's get started. Let's provide the title of a survey. Let's say the title is Prevalence of Hypertension and Diabetes. So this is the title here. Prevalence of hypertension and diabetes among the pediatric population aged 12 to 17 years in Nigeria during 2024. The location is Nigeria. The primary aims, we can generate with AI so that AI suggests aims for the research for us. So these are the aims that AI has suggested for us to analyze the dietary patterns and their relation to prevalence of hypertension, to evaluate awareness and knowledge of diabetes among adolescents, to identify the most common comorbidities associated with hypertension, and so on and so forth. So these are the aims that AI has suggested for us based on the topic that we selected. So because remember that you must have a research question and then you have aims. The research question is the broad thing you wish to achieve. The aims are like the different facets of that research question. For a proposal, for example, an NIH proposal, for example, it's typically you have 3 aims, where each aim is examining one aspect of that big question. So let's say we want to select these 3, awareness and knowledge of diabetes and hypertension. We want to look at the impact of socioeconomic status, and we want to, let's see, compare the prevalence of diabetes between urban and rural. So let's say those are the 3 we're interested in. And of course, if you select any of these, you can also edit it. It's not written in stone. You can always edit that. And let's clear the remaining ones away. The keywords, you can generate them yourself, or you can ask AI to generate them for you. So these are the keywords that AI has generated for us. So we select hypertension and diabetes. Let's just clear the remaining ones away. The Chisquares platform is linked with an ethical review board, so that if your study needs ethical review, you can do it directly from the platform. So these are some of the indications for ethical review. So for example, if we say our study involves children or minors, which it does, that flags that this study might need ethical review. So once we do that, we have set up our study. Next, we can invite collaborators. So this is a collaborative platform which allows different people to work together on the same project. And that is just for efficiency, so that you don't have to be sending things via email. So to add collaborators, you type in your email, and then you assign them a role. So you can assign a role as senior author or co-lead or whatever role they have. You can add as many collaborators as possible. There's no limit to the number of collaborators. So once you save, that sends an invitation to the individuals to invite them to the project. So here we have this flag that says your study may require IRB approval. IRB stands for Institutional Review Board, or otherwise called Ethical Review Board. So if you want to submit it from a platform, you click here. We are linked with an independent ethical review board called the Datasios Ethical Review Board. So to submit, you fill this form and you submit at the end. And that's how you submit your work for ethical review. This is just a dummy, so I'm just going to close this. By default, every study is a cross-sectional study on the platform, but you can change it to longitudinal. So let's say that we actually want to do a longitudinal study for this. So we come here, we come to view, we can now edit study timeline. We change the survey type from cross-sectional to longitudinal. So if it's longitudinal, we have to define the baseline and the number of follow-ups we want, because longitudinal simply means that people have been followed over time. So here, we have been asked, how many follow-ups do we have? So let's say we are trying to apply for a 2-year grant. We want to follow these individuals every 6 months. So that means that we have a baseline survey today, and every 6 months we will follow them. So that means that there are 3 follow-up surveys in addition to the baseline. And we want the interval between surveys to be 6 months. So we'll put 6 and we'll select months here because you have options for days, weeks, months, and years. So 6 months. And when do we want to start? We want to start today. The platform automatically knows that, okay, given that the start date is today, the end date will be in 2026. So this is how you set up a longitudinal survey on the platform. You don't have to come back 6 months and take questionnaires to those people. The platform does all of that automatically for you, right? So all you have to do is set up your study, and the rest is done automatically by the platform. So let's do a demo, for example, with just one question. Let's add a question with AI and see how that works, so that when you are setting up a research question that is longitudinal, you know how to set it up. So let's use the AI builder. There are different ways to set up questions. One of those is using AI. So let's see. Let's say we want to add this question to our survey. And so that's the question we want to ask. And let's say we want to translate our survey into many languages so that these are youth. We want them to be able to understand our survey. We can easily translate our survey. So for example, let's say we want to translate it into the local languages like Yoruba or Hausa. We come to language, we add a new language. We can, let's say, add a language like Yoruba. The language is loaded up and we can translate by, this is the text in English. We enter the corresponding text in the local language there by just typing it. If we don't know, we can ask AI to assist us by simply clicking AI suggested translation. It takes the text and translates it into the local language. Obviously, you want to make sure that you review it carefully to ensure that the text is fine and is fit for use. But essentially, this is how you translate into another language. So I'm just going to pause that for now, and let's launch it and let's see how the longitudinal plays out in case you're considering using that for your study. So we've set our dates. Now let's launch our survey. All right. So our survey is launched. Now we can share it with our participants. To share a survey, there are many ways you can do that. You can upload emails, you can share on social media, or you can just copy a link and give it to participants. So in this case, I'm just going to drop a link with you all here. So if you want to, let me drop a link here. So that's the link to the survey. So if you take it, so you can see how. So let me take the survey myself too. So start. So you see now it says we have a follow-up survey coming up. So everybody who takes the survey will see this. They can then provide their email to be included for follow-up. And when that time that we have set comes, the platform will automatically send the survey to those individuals, and that is how they follow up occurs. So you don't have to go manually and start doing the follow-up yourself. So we have 15 respondents. The platform allows you to download the methodology reports. Obviously, if we're trying to write a manuscript, we have to address the methodology. The platform does that for you. So you can just simply click here to download the methodology report for your study. The platform takes all the metadata, writes the report for you, which it's doing right now. It has finished writing the report, so we can view download history and grab the report. So let's look at the report here. So this is the report that my computer is being unresponsive. Lungile, while I struggle with my computer issues, are there questions there? Let me try one last time. Aha, third time is a charm. All right, so this is the methodology report the platform has written. This is the title. This is the keywords we selected. So it writes up the background for you. It talks about the study design. In this case, this study was a longitudinal design. It talks about the dates, planned dates. This is a table that gives you the current recruitment. This is the baseline survey, which will be from October 4th to April 4th, 2025, because it's for 6 months long. Follow-up 1, follow-up 2, follow-up 3. So right now we have 20 respondents. So it writes up the methodology for you, which you will find very useful when you're writing the report. And the same thing with the analysis. If you want to analyze the data, you can simply just grab the analysis report. You don't have to do it manually. So we are currently in baseline, so you only have baseline data available. So you click that. The question is, do you want to analyze that for a subset or for the whole population? In this case, we want for the whole population. It takes that data, analyzes it. It has finished the analysis, so we can now grab the analysis here. So let's look at that. So this is the analysis report. Prevalence of hypertension and diabetes among the population of interest. This is an analysis report. The analyzed population is all participants. We have 33 participants now. This is the question type. It gives you a table of the analysis and the figure as well. I mean, this is not interesting because we only have one question, but this just gives you a summary of how the platform does all of that for you. So you really don't have to do any manual intervention yourself. But in a nutshell, that's how you can set up a longitudinal study. You can download your data, both the raw data as well as the clean data set. The platform cleans your data for you automatically. But for those who like to suffer, you can also download the raw one and clean it yourself. But the cleaning is also done for you automatically. I see there are questions, their hands up, so I'm going to stop there and take questions that are there. Are there any questions I should answer?
Always. So I'll let me see, Shen.
Hello. Yeah, okay. Hi, Prof. As in, I'm so amazed. I'm so pleased with what has been on the offer for the last few days. Thanks for initiating this exceptional platform. And I'm really glad I'm part of this story. So, but for me, I want to paint a picture because we did a cohort study recently. So, but the way it was done was that at intervals every 3 months, where we did what we call an interrupted series. So we introduced different interventions and interviewed the people. But the people we were interviewing, we did by collecting the data through phone call conversations. It was like sending emails or anything. We were interviewing people who are in a rural setting with analog phones, and so we sent people to meet them to collect. So we sent agents who called them to. So based on this insight, this scenario I've painted, how does the Chisquares platform, what insights, as in how I'm trying to situate it in a situation like that, because there are contextual challenges from what I have painted that could limit that kind of access to using this platform in that situation context.
Okay, so there are two issues you've identified, right? One is the issue of the illiteracy. The other is the issue of lack of internet, right? Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Those are the two issues, and so we have to use four. Okay.
So there are two ways. Yeah. So the platform allows you to do that accordingly. So scenario one, let's say you are in a place where there is internet, right? What you would do is you would come to settings. So let me pause the survey for example, and just quickly show you what I'm referring to. So, so here you have internet and you're calling them. Let's say you are in a city and you're calling them where there's internet. What you could do in that case, come to settings, and you'll come to the button here that says multiple entries. It says enable button at the end of a survey to allow multiple submissions, e.g. for interviewer administered surveys, which is what you're doing. So in that case, you say, yes, I want a button at the end that will allow me to, I call the individual, and when I'm done and submit their response, I take the next person. So in that case, if I preview this, I will see that I start survey, I submit my response, and then I have this new button that is now here now that says submit another response. Because remember, I'm calling the individuals and I am taking their responses and submitting. So after I've called this first guy, I will submit another response and call the next person and submit it. That's one option. Option number 2 is for you to have a paper questionnaire. So in that case, let's say I want to administer 500 questionnaires to people, right? And I want them to fill it themselves. In that case, I come here, I specify the number of questionnaires I want. Let's say I want 5, and I want it in English, or it could be any language that I have already translated. I can then continue to download the paper questionnaire, which allows people to fill it themselves. So let's look at how that looks like. So we'll look at download history, and we'll download this. So this is the questionnaire we have, right? But you see, this one is a bit different because this has barcode technology. And so this allows us to be able to know that this page comes from this project, from this individual, right? So in this case, we can have this, each individual has their own special questionnaire. This is for individual number 1. So that you can see here, question 1, option number 1 for individual number 1. Question 1, option number 2, individual number 1. And so on and so forth. This is individual number 2. So question 1, option 1, individual number 2. So we do all of that, and then we can submit the questionnaire. When they submit their responses, we can scan, upload them, take pictures, upload, and the platform will automatically extract that data. Now, scenario number 3, you are in the field, and this time you don't have internet, right? There's no internet at all where you are working. So in that case, you use the offline mode. The offline survey mode allows you to collect data in areas where there's no internet. This was a survey we were doing yesterday on this same topic. So in that case, you'd come to settings here. You come to offline. See offline here. Those are the people who have in offline mode. So the offline mode essentially allows you to be able to collect data in areas where there's no internet. So you add your agents here. So in this case here, these are the agents I have. You add your agents. You can add as many agents as you want. And what that allows them is to be able to set up the survey in an offline mode. They can collect the data on their devices, maybe a phone or a tablet. Once they come back to where there's internet, the platform automatically uploads that data to the server. So you don't have to do any manual copy and paste or manual data entry. So between those 3 options, your use case should surely be covered. Okay, Lunga, next question, please.
Alrighty. Festus, you have a question. Would you like to speak? But in the meantime, I'll take Lillian's question. Please mute yourself if you're not speaking. Lillian. Abraham, please mute.
Hello, good evening.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Clearly.
Yeah, so this is Lillian. Thank you so much for this opportunity and then for the platform, the app. But I have a question about the ethical implication of using AI to generate the research reports. I don't know, do journals allow these submissions that include AI-generated content? Or is it that when the AI generates it, we can then edit it or something? I don't know. I'd like to get clarity on that. Thank you.
All right, sure. So the source of authority on issues of AI and journal medical ethics in general is COPE. COPE is called the Committee on Publication Ethics. And so here is COPE's guidelines, which, let me drop that here for you to read in your leisure. Where is the drop? So let me drop that. So you can read this in your leisure. But the bottom line here is that authors can use AI in writing. There's no prohibition against that. What COPE requires is transparency. Authors must be transparent in disclosing in their method section that they use AI. It's the same thing like when you use a statistical analysis tool like SAS or Stata or Python. You say data analysis will perform with Stata. There's no shame in that. We don't expect you to analyze the data manually. We expect you to use assistance in form of software. The same thing, COPE requires that if you use AI tools, then you should be transparent in reporting that this was used. But at the end of the day, that authors are responsible for their work, right? So as far as AI tools are concerned, one, there's really no requirement that you use it. So it's a two-sided coin. There's no requirement that you use AI, obviously, but there's also no prohibition that you against you using it. So, and the beauty about the platform is that every single thing on the platform, there is a manual way of doing it, as well as an automated way. So for people who do not want to use automation, there's no requirement that you do. You can just do the old-fashioned way and do things manually, and that is completely fine too. I hope that answers your question. All right, next question, please.
Can the platform analyze quantitative data using tests such as logistic regression?
Yeah, we're releasing a full platform in 2 months, which would address all multivariable analysis. So yeah, that's coming up.
Okay. Muzamil. Sorry, Muzamil.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, do you hear me?
Clearly.
Okay, thank you, Prof, for very informative lecture. I have a question. Can I use chi-square platform in a different country like Sudan? Is it possible to use it, or is it restricted at some country? Yeah, right now yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, the fact that you're speaking over Zoom means you have internet. And if you have internet, you can use it anywhere in the world.
Okay, good. Thank you a lot.
You're welcome.
Can I start research with questions, assuming I don't have a title or statement of the problem in mind?
So this is why you have the AI toolkit. If you just have a statement and you don't have a question, well, I encourage you to go and play with this AI research proposal builder. You just put whatever statement you have, and you see it will come up with a fully fleshed out, eloquent research proposal with aims, backgrounds, the innovation significance for you, right? So, so yeah, if you just have a blank idea, a rough idea, just go and play with this, and that would really be a game changer for you.
Charles. You can unmute now.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So actually, what I posted, the question I posted was what I wanted to ask. But then when I got the context in terms of that research question, the person was actually doing it for that particular hospital. So it's more or less like a very localized research for that hospital, because the Reverend Sister in that facility kind of saw the trends in these two issues. So I was trying to find out what's going on. So that's one on that part. Two, I wanted to get some I had some issues when I was trying to do some search using the Boolean operators that you taught us the last time. So I more or less followed the pattern and came up with some structures which I ran, but I didn't get any. Maybe I didn't do it well. So I don't know how much time we'll have. Whether you can just run us through that again, just like maybe in a minute. So that's just what I wanted to. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So so thanks so much for the context. But again, I just want to emphasize the research question we discussed earlier. There is nothing wrong with that question. This question, the take-home message shouldn't be that this question is bad. No, it's perfectly fine. It's so important to Our Lady of Apostle Hospital that they answer this question, right? It is extremely important to them. But we're saying in the context of publishing an international journal. So I just wanted to emphasize that shouldn't be the take-home point that the question sucks. The question is fine. But we're saying in the context of publishing internationally, how do we create impact? Is such a subjective thing. What is impactful to you may definitely not be impactful to me, and vice versa. But again, like we said earlier, when it comes to publishing, the one person whose opinion matters as far as impact is the editor-in-chief, because he or she's the one who decides what gets published. So just to reinforce that, this is a solid question, but from the perspective of publishing globally, we may just have to find ways of making it a bit more impactful in terms of the context. Now, the second issue about framing of Booleans, without knowing what the research question is, maybe we're going to have another session on systematic reviews. For the last session, we did not cover. So that might be better suited for that. So that's how about we just move it to that session so that we can cover that comprehensively, since I don't know what the search term was. So let's do it that way.
Thank you. You advised on the use of interrogative analysis for research questions for quantitative studies, but I did not get what you recommended as strategy for research questions for qualitative studies.
This session is mostly focused on quantitative research, right? We're going to have another session on qualitative research, but this session was about how do you approach quantitative research. The approaches for qualitative research are quite different, right? From how we frame the questions to issues of sample size. So for example, with qualitative studies, we're not so big on sample size because it's all about saturation. At what point do we start hearing the same themes over and over and over? Well, that means we're saturated and we can stop, right? So the approaches are quite different. And so that's why since we can't cover everything under the heavens, we just focus on quantitative, but we're going to have another session on qualitative too, where we'll talk about the peculiarities and how we should approach them.
Thanks, Prof. Another question. What are the odds that a project can disappear or get lost from online due to bugs, etc.? Can projects be recovered?
Yes, anything can be recovered, but the probability of your project getting lost is zero. Well, let me not say zero. If there's a global wipeout of the internet, some huge but short of that, no, it's zero. Within normal context of day-to-day life, no, it's almost impossible.
Thank you. Dr. Samuel Abayomi.
Thank you so much, Prof, for a wonderful time. I've been enjoying myself since the beginning of the training. Yes, a quick one. I just want to know if there is a downloadable, or you are considering a downloadable app for Chi-Square that we can easily have, maybe can download on our phone, and probably we can use on the go while we are collecting data? That's my question. Thank you.
So when you install, if you're doing data for offline environment, the data comes as, you can download it on your app. So I don't know whether, let me show you my I don't know if you can see, Lungi, can you see the
No.
Okay, sure, okay, that's fine. But when you're doing data in offline environments, like offline data collection, there's an app installed on your phone which allows you to collect data in offline settings. But for online settings, you have to use a browser, right? You have to have access to the internet and all. One of the things we're actually considering, but this is not a priority, is to have a desktop version of Chi-Squares that doesn't require internet for anything, right? So sample size and sampling and everything will be hosted on your machine, on your computer, and will simply run the functions that power them, so that everything is done. Your data is on your local machine, not in the cloud, and so that is a consideration. It's something we're considering purely from an equity perspective, that there are large segments of the world where they don't have access to internet, where the educational standards can definitely need some improvement. And so what is the role of Chi-Squares in just, from a good Samaritan clause, just, advancing technology to help people like that. So, but again, that's something on our calendar, but it's not tomorrow. It's maybe, a year or two, but that's something definitely we want to do, to build a desktop version where you can just install it from your CD-ROM or a flash drive, and you can use the platform on your computer.
Thank you, Prof. And thanks everyone, those who are sharing those links. Thank you for helping. Ishmael, you gave me such a tough time with all the lines you were drawing. I want to punish you and not let you ask your question, but you may speak.
Thank you very much. I am highly sorry for that. It was not intentional. Thank you, Prof, for the wonderful presentation. I'll start by giving testimony to what you have said earlier on. The Chi-Square platform generally, and the AI toolkits in particular, they are actually blessings to the research community, to the scientific community generally. I played with it. I have generated a research proposal. I downloaded it and I was really amazed. And truly, as you said, it is a life changer for me. And I'm sure it is going to be the same for everybody who tries it. And that brings me to the first question I want to ask now. Having seen how marvelous the platform is, I had to ask myself, what is the philosophy behind naming the platform Chi-Square? Because I know Chi-Square is one of the statistical techniques in inferential statistics. So that is that. Then my other questions, I first of all want to ask about the institutional review boards, the ethical review board you talked about earlier on, which is embedded with the Chi-Square platform. So I want to know, is it particularly aligned to any particular discipline, or whatever kind of research you are doing? If you are utilizing the Chi-Square platform and the particular research requires ethical review, then you can make use of it. Then beside that, how about the country? If I'm in Nigeria, for example, and I want to carry out my research in Nigeria and it requires ethical review approval, will the one in the Chi-Square platform serve my purpose, or I will need to find one within my country? That is about that. Then finally, about the sample size you have shown in the platform, how to calculate sample size. Like doctoral students, actually, when they come to defend their proposal or their research, they are definitely going to be asked, this sample size you arrive at, how did you get it? Which particular formula did you use? We are fond of using Taro-Yamani formula. So I don't know, is there any particular formula that the Chi-Square platform utilizes, or if there is no any specific formula and we make use of it, how do we reveal it? How do we say we arrive at that formula? That is about that. Thank you, sir.
Actually, you said you were going to ask 2 questions, and so I was not taking notes. Your questions ended up being multiple, so I forgot one of them, actually.
Okay, Prof. I'll remind you.
Okay, all right, sure. So let me answer the last one first, which is if you calculated sample size, how do you... So every single thing on the platform is designed to be scientifically reproducible. So let's go back to the calculation we made last. So we have 824. You click on show reference. When you click on show reference, it shows you the formula that was used. This is a standard formula, so you can download the formula, and it also shows you the parameters in the formula. And that holds true for every single thing on the platform. The same thing with sampling, right? I mean, scientific platform, so it's all about methodology must be there. So if you also provide sampling, you see the methodology is provided there as to what is going on behind the scenes and the reference, right? Because this is science, it has to be reproducible and it has to be defensible. So that's how you can access that. This second question about IRB. So the Ethical Review Board on the platform is agnostic of discipline. So it doesn't matter what discipline you are in. It doesn't really matter which country you are from. So as far as it meets the standards for what research is. At Chi-Squares, we're a big fan of NIH's policy of SIRBs, or single IRB. NIH strongly endorses the position that there's no evidence that having multiple ethical review boards, that it doesn't provide any better protection for patients or for subjects than just having one single central IRB. And I mean, I personally believe in that policy. And so the Datasis IRB can serve as a central IRB. It can review studies anywhere in the world, and on any discipline as far as human subjects are involved. Now, the bigger question actually should be your institutional policy, because some institutions have certain policies on what kind of reviews are needed. So if you're doing, for example, a doctoral work or a master's work, certain institutions will require that approval must come from their own domestic or their own institutional review board. So those are some things that you have to consider. But as far as the Datasis IRB, it's agnostic to discipline and to country. The other question was, the Chi-Squares name. How did we come about it? Well, it's drawn from the Chi-Square statistic. We're simply looking for a name that was no more than 2 syllables. We don't want a long name apparently. A name that people could easily remember. We wanted a case-sounding word, because they just sound cooler and are more memorable. Think of names like Coca-Cola. They're very memorable, right? Because they have a case-sounding consonants. So we're looking for a word, a name that had all those criteria, was case sounding, was no more than 2 syllables, and was deeply associated with statistics. We're also looking for, obviously, a name that will not be so expensive. Originally we had Chi-Square, but when we went to go, let me look for GoDaddy again. When we went to GoDaddy and typed Chisquares.chi-square. Initially, that's what we wanted to buy, Chi-Square with no S, right? The domain was pretty expensive. Where is it now? How come I never ever find this domain? I'm very sorry. I must find out what the current price of Chi-Square is. Chisquare.com. So this was the domain we wanted. Chisquare.com. Okay, the price has dropped now. This domain was over $10,000 at that time. It's currently $9,499. So we just added an S to Chi-Squares to give us Chi-Squares. And we ended up buying that domain for $1. So our initial plan was to get Chi-Square.com, but it's like, there's no way we're going to pay $10,000 just for a domain. And so that's where the S came in. But that's just the history of the name and why it's plural. but now I even like the plural form more than the single chi-square.com. I hope I answered all your questions.
Sorry. Prof, someone asked a question that they have 22 respondents for their study. Is that study publishable?
It's all about context. Without knowing anything about the study, it's impossible to give an answer to that question. Everything is publishable. It's all about context. So I don't know what without more nuance. It's hard to say. But for you to publish a study with 22 people, it must be really it's either it's a qualitative study, right? That you're just looking at more of contextual issues. Or if it's a quantitative issue that it's really, really top dollar. But if it's a quantitative study and we're just 22 people, you're going to struggle. You might end up publishing it in, finally. But again, it's hard, it's impossible to answer that question without more context.
Okay. Thanks, Prof. Let me see. Are there any more hands? Okay. Grace. You can unmute. Grace Upai. Okay. I'll move to Panyan Budong.
Hello, good evening to everyone. Thanks for the opportunity. I joined late, but I want to find out if we can actually import data into Chi-square as we normally do in R and SITA. Maybe.
Yeah, we're extending those
an essay data sheet you want.
Sorry for interrupting.
Hello.
Sorry for interrupting. I thought I couldn't hear you, so I thought you were done. Please go ahead.
Your line is breaking. Yeah, I was not getting the response. Your line was breaking.
No, it's your line that is breaking.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that can you import Excel data sheet into the platform?
Yes, you'll be able to do that in the next in 2 months. Like I said earlier, we're releasing the full version of the Chisquares platform in about 2 months, where you can write your manuscript from beginning to end in literally under 1 hour.
Wow.
So for those of you who suffer to write manuscript years, when we release a full platform, that will shock the socks off your ankles. So and all of that. I mean, so you would be able to import your data, whether it's complex data, survey data, or just routine data. You analyze, write a report. You can even submit your journal all within under 1 hour. So that's what we're releasing. That's what we're working on right now. I'm going to release that by the end of the year.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Someone just asked how can they get access to the platform. I am posting links. So if you're affiliated to a Nigerian institution, please use that Google document. You'll find a list inside an Excel spreadsheet where you can find all the universities. And if your school is not listed there, there's also an option for other schools not listed there. Otherwise, if you're an individual not affiliated to a university, you can use the first link for individuals and follow those prompts. Let me see who else's hand is up. Alum Benedict. Let me see, sorry. Can unmute yourself.
Good evening, Prof. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, I can hear you. Good evening, Prof.
Hello.
Yeah. Thank you for the lecture. It's quite insightful. My first question is, on the Chi-Square platform? Is it a free platform, or do we have to pay to have access to it? Then secondly, can I have access to the link for the launch of the AI tools? I missed the launch. I thought it was supposed to be by 7 p.m. East African time. So because all your trainings are always 7 p.m. in East African time. So I just logged in, and I found out that the launch had already gone. So I missed it, and I would have loved to know what happened there and how to assess them. Then the third question is, assessing and analyzing data with the Chi-Square platform was quite easy. Is it publishable like that, or will there still be a kind of twist or manual adjustment before we can publish it? Thank you.
All right, thanks. So, is the Chisquares platform free? No. Why? Because nothing in life is free. If something is free to use, somebody else is paying for it. For folks in the Nigerian university space, well, the sponsorship is through NUC. But we also have a free version of the Chisquares platform. We're free, where you can still access basic functionalities, obviously with limitations. And the reason why nothing can be free is because it has to be profitable for it to be sustainable. Right? Building the software like Chisquares I cannot tell you how prohibitively expensive it is. So that's why it cannot be free. The link to access the platform, if you are in a Nigerian institution, has already been shared with you, so you can access it from there. The recordings to the launch are on our YouTube channel, so you can access it from there as well. I believe the links will be shared with you. The third question about the analysis done on the platform, can you use it? Well, the answer is it depends. It depends on what your research question is. Remember that the dog should always wag the tail. The tail should never wag the dog. The research questions determine the methods, right? It's not the other way around. So if your research question is so and so, then that research question drives the analysis. So without knowing what the research question is, it is impossible to answer that question of whether you need to do some additional analysis or not, because it's very contextual.
Okay, Prof. Thank you.
Welcome.
I have sorry for the interruption. I have a study that is ongoing, which is on the optimization of big data analytics in enhancing transparency in financial sector. So, and it requires some data. And anything financial sector, you cannot go to the bank it requires some kind of secrecy. It's not easy to just expose. So I don't know how I can manipulate or extract data and use it on this platform.
Well, I mean, I'll be very hard pressed to be able to help you in that regard. I have no context whatsoever for what you're trying to achieve or the methods with which you're trying to achieve them. And without that, it's impossible to give an answer.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you.
Well done, Prof. Thank you for all you're doing. How can one benefit maximally from the platform if you already have drafts of manuscripts that need fine-tuning to make it publishable in international journals?
You can, depends on the stage, depends on if the data is collected, we're collected on the platform. If they were collected on the platform already writes a methodology for you and all of that. If not, one trick you can also do is that you can use the proposal builder to generate a proposal, which you can try and see elements from there that you can use in your work. Yeah, and that's what you do. So if your manuscript if you already have a draft, your best bet is to use a proposal builder. Of course, it's not a proposal you're trying to build, but you're trying to repurpose some aspects of that for that work. But that's, or you can just wait. You can wait in 2 months, and when we release the full ecosystem. But those are your options, really.
Grace?
Hello. Good evening, everyone.
Yes.
Once again, I want to sincerely appreciate Chi-Square team for this beautiful innovation. So interesting. I was so elated when I visited the platform and I tried putting up a proposal. I was so amazed. I was so amazed, and I've learned so much from what I received as a feedback. Just a little question. I observed that in the background and some sections of what I received as feedback, there were some references indicated with numbers. But getting to the reference session, I saw fewer than the numbers of references. So I don't know if the platform is still being worked on, or what can I really do to get those references that are missing? Like in one of the references, I saw 1 to 14, then another one 25, but the references that came up at the end of the proposal were just less than 10, about 8 or so. So what can I really do in that regard? And my second question, when one uses AI to put up a manuscript, not necessarily a proposal, and the person indicates that and is being transparent enough to indicate that part of the manuscript was put up with the assistance of AI, is there a different criteria for assessing such manuscripts, or is it going to be assessed just like other manuscripts? Because that could be a concern if they assess manuscripts based on whether it's AI assisted or not. So those are my two major questions. Thank you so much. God bless you.
You're welcome. So the first question about the platform, the AI toolkit, like I said, this is the beta version. If you can wait, we said you can wait, but we're actually encouraging folks. So it's still a beta version. Simply means that it is actively under development. Like the references part you mentioned, we are right now engineering them as we speak, right? The goal is, for example, it shouldn't just fetch references that are only from a medical perspective. We have to engineer solutions that pick references from the whole spectrum of human knowledge. So it is actively under. The reason why we released this beta version is so that, one, well, we don't want a scenario where we build and say, ta-da, here you go. We want to involve our community in building. And so that is the whole point of releasing the beta version. It's not to say it's complete. That's why you see this indicator here. But just so you can play along with it, knowing what's coming along the way. So, but you should expect a final version where this is no longer this tagline is no longer there by the end of this month, end of October, which is when we are releasing the fully functional, highly polished version of the AI toolkit where you will not have any problem. So, but for now, you should expect glitches because it's beta version. It's work in progress. We're actively building it. Regarding your second question, well, I cannot speak for other editors in chief now, but I can speak for myself as an editor-in-chief of a top journal. I don't really care what tool you use. What I am interested in is, does this paper add to the body of knowledge? Is the methodology robust? Okay. Is it a controversial topic? Hopefully it is, right? That would get people talking about the methodologies you use, whether you use what software you use, whether you use AI, is a secondary issue that does not really play into consideration. So like I said, I cannot speak for other journals, but I can speak for my journal, right? And so that there's no different standard for journals that were reviewed by AI or that involved AI. Plus, honestly, editors-in-chief do not have time to even look at those kind of things. They're too busy. With issues of substance and start reading. No, so there are no different standards for if you use AI versus if you do not. The reason why you asked to declare is just for transparency of scientific process. It's for the readers, not for the editor. The readers and just to keep up with scientific standards as to disclosure. The same way you disclose software. I use Data, I use Excel, I use R. And that's the only thing we're asking. Also disclose which AI tool you use for the work. And again, please, for those of you who are using the beta toolkit, please, we really want to hear what you think, right? That's the whole point of releasing it ahead of time. If you have feedback, click this icon here and tell us. And the feedback could be anything. It could be, oh, can you consider adding another tool? Describe the tool, or just email us, or if you're on our WhatsApp group, just drop a comment. That is the whole point of releasing the tool ahead of time. Otherwise, we'll have waited till end of October before releasing it, but we wanted to involve our community in the build. So please, we'd like to hear from you. Good things, the bad things. And that's also why we're asking you to please, if you like, we're requesting that you record a 2-minute video, 3-minute video of what feature you like, and post it on your LinkedIn and tag at least 5 people who will benefit from it, so that we share the word. So that's what our challenge is all about. All right, next question.
Hello.
Hello.
Who's that? Okay, Ngozi.
Hello, thank you, Dr. Nkosi, and thank you so much, Prof. Quite impressive. You've said so much on a research question, and you mentioned the true criteria that it must be systematic and having a new knowledge, kind of a knowledge gap. It must have a knowledge gap from the research question we are setting out or we are introducing. My question is, how do you generate this research question? Because to our own knowledge, or rather to my own knowledge, we generate research question from statements of problem. If you are writing your thesis or dissertation, you have your background to the knowledge, you have your statement of problem, you have your research question, then it flows down to the objective and the rest of them. And we are meant to understand that you generate your research question from the statement of problem. And from all your listing, you have not really mentioned anything regarding that statement of problem. So how do you generate this research question? Or do we just formulate a topic and then form it into a research question? Then from there it flows. Thank you, sir.
Okay, you're welcome.
Then my second question is, can this tool help to, or rather advise on the appropriate methods to use regarding whatever topic you're writing on, and equally to help you to analyze based on the method you adopted, especially those of us in social sciences and management related courses? Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you very much. So your first question was about questions. So in Latin, the word called questions, there are 2 different types of question in terms of the etymology. One is interrogations. Interrogative questions are generally, you know the answer already. You just want to confirm whether this person will confess. Think of what happens in police cells when they're trying to interrogate a suspect. They already have a good idea of what the answer is. The whole point of interrogation is to confirm, right? But research in general follows the second type of question, which we call percontations. Percontations are questions where there is a desire to create new knowledge. We don't know. If we knew already, we will not do it, right? So research generally is framed around percontations. And so that's why I said earlier that for something to be researched, there must be an intent to create new knowledge. We're not saying you create new knowledge. You must at least have the intention originally. What you end up with might be confirmatory, but there was an intent. And secondly, it must be systematic. So if you just work in a government agency where you just collect data, even if it's systematic, there was the intention is not to create new knowledge, so it's not necessarily research. Now, your question was the statement of the question.
Statement of the problem. That's because you have a problem. You have a problem you want to identify and you want to solve. That is why you're embarking on this study.
Yeah. So statement of a problem. So in research, that problem must be framed as a question. So that's what we're saying. It's everything starts with a question. You don't start with, it's fine, you know, of course, most things we say appear almost linearly. So sometimes you start with a statement of a problem. So in general, right, how do we determine what things we research? We look around us. We look at, wow, I observe so-and-so issues in society. I look at some societal ills. Maybe you're in the social sciences, like you say, you look at things like, oh, there is maybe kidnapping in the country. And you're like, wow, this is such a problem, right? Kidnapping is a problem. That is not a question. You're just making a statement. So you now say, oh, geez, I wonder why. What factors are associated with kidnapping? Like what societal factors or what factors of upbringing make people become kidnappers, all right? See, now you have started from that problem, that statement, but you must go back and create a question from that statement. Otherwise, you've not even started. Saying kidnapping is such a problem is a statement of a problem, but it's not a research question. You have to go back and now say, all righty, this problem can be addressed from so many angles. Kidnapping is a problem. Oh, that I can come up with 100 questions from that, right? I can say, what are the trends in kidnapping over time? I can say, what factors are associated with kidnapping? I can say, what are the long-term consequences of being a known kidnapper, right? There are many ways you can approach that. Some of them are important, some are not important. So, but you, from that statement of a problem, you have to now refine a research question from that, right? So that's why research general, we have to just start from the question and then investigate. So you start with a problem, from that problem, you carve a well-defined research question, and then that drives what the aims are. If you don't know what or how to drive a research question from your statement, you can come to the AI research question generator. You type in your idea or what the problem is here, and it's going to create questions for you and suggest aims and objectives that align with that problem. But it's all about framing. We have to frame things a particular way. Right? And so, but for scientific research, you can start anywhere. You can start with a problem, or you can start with a statement, but the initial goal point in research is the question. And then the question drives everything. The question drives the aims drive the objectives, those drive the methods, those drive the results, and so on and so forth. I hope that is clear.
Yeah. What I'm trying to say that, doesn't mean that, we don't really need to state the problem before stating the research question. That means invariably stating the problem is irrelevant. That is not necessary. You just go straight to the research question, then it flows.
Now,
is that what you're saying?
Scientific writing, right? Nobody writes science and says, nobody writes science and says, oh, the research question was this. That sounds very amateurish, right? And so even if it's not written that way, we're saying that in your head and the head of your team members, you conceptualize it in a way that was a percontation, was a question, even if nobody ends up writing it and saying, so of course, there's no scientific journal where, at least no top journal where you pick the work and then you will see them saying the statement of a problem was blah, blah, blah. Nobody writes that way, right? But we're saying conceptually, you must have thought that way and you must have framed the research question, because when we read the work, it's going to show whether or not you had a clearly defined question in your mind. Now, I am not saying that it is wrong to write the research question explicitly, but those are issues of preferences. You can choose to say the statement of a problem was this. Nobody's stopping you. You can develop your own style for how you want to write. There are no rules that say you must write a particular way. But what we want to see is that your research is actually solving an actual problem, and that is not rocket science for anybody to figure out. They just need to read that paper and they can tell whether or not. Now, the style of writing is up to you. If you want to say, our research question was as follows, that is perfectly fine. If you want to say the statement of a problem was as follows, if you want to put the statement first and the research question next, it doesn't, those things do not matter, right? What matters is does your paper move the needle on anything important? So we don't want to get lost in issues of like procedural things or very performative exercises that really don't lead us anywhere interesting. I hope that is clear.
Yeah, it's clear. Then the second question, advising on the methods, on the research methods appropriate to use.
So the research method, so if you use the AI toolkit, the research proposal, to suggest a proposal, it will obviously suggest a method. Now, you would then read it and decide whether that aligns with what you want, and then you can edit it. So yes, it will suggest methods for you as well.
Okay. And equally analyze it if you want.
But proposal means you don't have the data yet. So if it's a proposal, proposing to do the research. You propose to do the research, then you do the research, then you analyze the research. So at this point, there's nothing to analyze because it's simply proposing.
It's proposing, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Prof. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Sam. Then the hand-on challenge, when is it coming up?
You can post it today, but we really want to hear from you. Like, it gets boring just seeing our post. So please, we really will appreciate. This is your own way of saying thank you to Chisquares. We want you to post and tag at least 5 people who will benefit from that. The instructions for how to do it. It doesn't matter. You can use Zoom. You can use that. We shared some tools, free tools you can use to record. And you don't even have to be in the video. If you want to be in the video, sure, you can be in the video. That's awesome. But if you don't want to be in the video, you just record your screen and share what favorite features you like. It doesn't have to be the AI toolkit. It can be any part of the Chisquares platform.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah.
All right. I guess we've answered all the questions.
Ngozi took all the time. Dr. Rose.
Well, Ngozi owes us 5 videos then.
Yes.
I think the number of videos has to be proportional. Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, Prof.
Hello.
Good evening, everybody. Prof, thank you so much for your stamina and all that you have helped us to understand. I am Dr. Okoro from Unicross. My concerns are I'm of social science profession. We deal on buildings and values. I want to ask about the trend study. Usually we have database that we capture our values of properties, either rental values or capital values. And if you want to study, we go to our archives or our database and get the values over the years. So my concern is, how do we use this data on the Chisquares platform? You know, when you were talking about trend study, capturing the data, you say we capture the people, the respondent, put on the Chisquares platform and follow them over time. But our own is that we have captured those data that we capture for our own use. Is it relevant? And can it be used on the Chisquares platform? And how can they be used?
Yeah, I mean, data is always, the relevance of data lies in the way we frame research questions. So in the kind of scenario you pointed, those kind of data you have ecologic variables. Ecologic variables are variables that are not necessarily at the level of individuals, but are relevant to a group, common to a group. So for example, the example you gave, like property values, right? You know, that may be common to a town, or you might be looking at, for example, location, exactly. Like you might be looking at like GDP of a country or some other community level indicator. Those are extremely important because the most some of the most practical studies are studies where you get individual level data and you superimpose on those ecological variables. So you might be interested, for example, in looking at how does the how does, you know, the likelihood of being the kidnapper arise? How's it influenced by the community level characteristics? You're not only interested in individual level characteristics, but you're also interested in some community level characteristics like the GDP of the country they came in from, or how the rate of violence in the city they came from. So in that case, you can get the ecologic variables for all the communities in that study. But of course, some individuals, you know, many individuals will share, all individuals from the same community will have the same value for that ecological variable. But that's a very interesting way to see how ecologic variables or, you know, neighborhood level factors interact with individual level factors to influence outcomes of interest, right? Especially outcomes of social nature. The second part of your question, so how do you do this on the Chi-Squares platform? Well, when we release now you can't do that on the platform, but like I said, 2 months, I guess all the answers you have are 2 months, right? Like we are trying to build the most sophisticated platform for research the world has ever seen, right? And so yes, in 2 months, when I say that you will see in 2 months, why we make that claim, but then you can be able to do all of that on the platform then. And so you have to wait for 2 months, and then you can be able to achieve that kind of work on the Chi-Squares platform then.
Okay, Prof, thank you so much. Please, there's another question that I had when you were giving the lecture. It was when we were treating the question that one of us posted about clustering the respondents. For me, since it was an age bracket kind of respondent, for me, what I would have done, I don't know whether I would have been right or not, would have been to stratify those respondents either into 2 groups following their age, but not local government and class and states. So would I be right or wrong?
Okay, so we need to step away from categorizations like right or wrong to more like more efficient or less efficient, right?
Okay.
Because right and wrong is like just black and white, you know, like, you know, as you know, of course, life is much more nuanced than that. And so from the perspective of efficiency, right, the single most important thing to study design is money. Like if I'm to design a study in the country, like the first thing I'm going to ask is like, how much money do you really have? Like how much money are we talking about here? Because that drives a lot of things. The kind of design you're going to do will be a function of the budget. So, so that's why I'm saying that it's a better way to think of things, the framework of efficiency, right? Which is a function of cost. And so, because remember that when you're stratifying, let's say you wanted to divide the study into, you want to have like 4 strata. Well, you have ultimately multiplied the sample size by 4, right? So if the sample size required was 1,000 people, now you need 4,000 people. So the question is, do you have the resources to sample 4,000 people? Let's say you're offering them incentives. Maybe you're giving everybody $10 for participation. That's $4,000 already, right? And so those kind of considerations would weigh in. So if there's no time and we have limited ability to recruit participants, and we definitely have no money to provide incentives, then the issue of clustering becomes dead on arrival. We cannot stratify. We just have to work within our means. So this is some of the I'm making. It's not just about the science, right? It's also about practicality and resources and efficiency. All of those things come together. And that's why I'm saying that we just need to move away from right or wrong to is it more efficient or less efficient?
Highly appreciated, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Usman.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. Actually, I have been following all these lectures, and I've been asking myself, how is Chi-Square platform relevant from any qualitative research. I know there are some softwares that can assist in making qualitative researches like Atlas, like in vivo. And I know qualitative research mostly involves observation, interviews, and some document analysis. So I'm actually not talking about collection of data. Rather, I'm talking about the issue of methodology and the writing the proposal itself, methodology, and after collecting the data through interview or through observation or something, how could Chi-Square platform help in transcription of the interview and actually coming up with the report on that? Because most of the social sciences they use qualitative researches instead of quantitative. So that is actually my concern. Thank you very much, Prof.
Oh, you're welcome. So the Chisquares platform allows you to collect open-ended responses. So let me show you an example of what we're saying. So if you try to create a question, you can come to open-ended questions here. And under that, there are different types of questions, like multi-line questions where the individuals type in whatever they want to say in the paragraph form, or multimedia questions. Multimedia questions could be audio or video. You can say, please type record an audio describing your challenges in life, right? So that when you, so this is an audio response, right? So that when you collect the data from participants, they can speak, they can record, so they can either upload audio or they can record their audio, as the case might be, to allow that. So in this case here, they can then capture their responses and speak into their, their device. Right? So that this is what I've captured from my own response, for example. It's here, they can then capture their responses and speak into their, Jeez, I hate hearing the sound of my voice. And then the summits, right? So that can be audio, that can be video, that can be any multimedia file. Platform transcribes that automatically. The platform applies methods for whenever you have unstructured data, the platform automatically applies methods for qualitative data, applies specifically coding and thematic analysis, which is handled by our AI system, and it will generate a report for you automatically. So that's how the platform addresses issues of qualitative data. Okay, next question, please.
I think that was the last one.
Oh,
that was
awesome.
Usman, right?
Yeah. Sorry. Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you very much for the response. I'm really satisfied. Thank you.
All right, great.
Okay, that was the last one. You can disappear before we get more questions.
Exactly. All right, thanks so much, everyone. And I love this comment by Ahmad Sulaiman. No shame in using AI tools. I'm right there with you. All right. So please, we look forward to hearing, seeing your posts on LinkedIn. And yeah, until then, I'll see you next week then. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof.
You're welcome.
Williams. Okay. Is Prof gone? Okay, sorry, Williams. I'm going to ask him this question. Are you married, Prof. Dorcas? Yeah. Dorcas, why are you asking personal questions? Oh, Lord. I'm sharing links again for those who are still asking about how to get recordings. This recording is available on our YouTube channel.